Welcome here, everyone. This is Mr. Talbot coming to you for some quick overview of some of your reading. We're going to start with kind of the first topic in our AP class, and that's going to be 1.1 developments in East Asia. So when we talk about East Asia, kind of look at the map here. We're going to be really kind of centering in on China being the big player, but then also talking about Vietnam, Korea, and Japan as well. So kind of when we do these videos, really important thing, this is not a replacement for the reading that you do. So you should have already done the reading. Want you to be using those notes as we're looking at these things. Add to them, review them. Don't want you making new notes. Don't want you trying to write down everything you see. Okay, just using those good practices. And we're going to use it to prep for classes, review before quizzes, all those kind of things. So make sure we have a kind of total focus as we do these things. So kind of understand the context. We're kicking off here around 1200, but it's important up to this point in history, China has already been doing a lot of things. And by this point, it's kind of going to be the big power of the region. It's going to be the one that's going to kind of be able to spread their culture and influence and at times kind of push around and bully the other countries that we already mentioned in the region. Before this, China had been a bunch of different smaller empires, and they kind of went through what's called the Warring States period for hundreds and hundreds of years. And from that time period, a lot of big ideas of Chinese culture, like Confucianism, which we'll talk about, and Taoism, are all going to kind of come out of this. But by now, China's starting to kind of come together. It's becoming more unified. And as a result, we're going to see a lot of big growth in China during this time under what's the Tang and then the Song dynasties. And so we see from our text, it's going to say China is the most commercialized country in the world. And with that, they're going to be the richest and the most urbanized country in the world. Several cities of over 100,000 people, when you wouldn't really find single cities of that in other civilizations at the time. So our first objective, we're really looking at the systems of government that the Chinese dynasties are going to be establishing. Now, at the top of China, they're going to have an emperor. And he's going to be promoting Confucian ideas. And for the emperor, Confucianism is a great idea that comes out of the Warring States period. So it's been a part of Chinese culture now for hundreds of years. But if I'm an emperor, what I love about it is that it's very hierarchical in the sense of you've got, your peasants and poor are going to be below your aristocrats. Women are going to be below men. Children are going to be below parents. And then also the big one for the emperor is that everyone kind of views the emperor as the father figure of their kind of family. So everyone's loyal to the state, in particular, everyone's going to be loyal to the emperor. As time is going on, China's government's getting more and more centralized, meaning so the power is coming from the emperor. Now, China is not the size it is today, not as many people as today, but it's still a very big region to try and rule over, especially in a time before modern communication stuff. So what they have to have is what we call a bureaucracy. And a bureaucracy or bureaucrats are basically think of it as people that work for the government. They're the people that maybe they just run a small village. Maybe they run a larger organization or a state, but it's all going back to that central government. The United States today, we have a very, very large bureaucracy. China today has a big bureaucracy. And we kind of see a lot of people are going to work for the state. And it's going to be kind of how they get a lot of things done. Like I said, China has some big urban centers, large cities, especially by the standards of that time. In the rest of East Asia, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, they're not going to be as urbanized, a lot more rural-based, a lot less of their economy is going to be based on the market and trading. Japan, Korea, Vietnam are more based on farming. So we're not going to see them ever really develop a centralized government, at least not nearly as quick as China does. Japan's going to be almost 500 years later, and Japan, where it gets confusing is that Japan has an emperor as well, and they kind of think of things the same way. Kind of this idea that it's a mandate of heaven, what we'll call later divine right. The idea basically that God puts these people on Earth to rule over us, and in China that felt normal, and Japan's got an emperor, but Japanese emperor, because of it being rule based, doesn't have as much power. And eventually, what we call these shogunates, which are kind of these warlords in Japan, one of them pretty much takes over and is going to start to centralize it. The emperor is still going to stick around, but again, never the power that we see in China. This actually gets to be a little drama hundreds of years down the road when we get to World War II, and people still debate how much power the Japanese emperor really had. So that's kind of one of the big differences that we see. Really centralized government in China, much more split up, much more rule-based in the rest of East Asia. Other thing about the government, particularly looking kind of at China, and they're going to spread this, is this idea of meritocracy, which is the idea people get their job based on merit, based on that they're good at their job. Not that I know somebody, not that I was born into it. Now, that's kind of the theory of it. In reality, if you're born into wealth and privilege today, in the 21st century, you're more likely to be able to get some of those higher level jobs. Same thing's true in this time period in China. If you're a wealthier kid, you're going to get a better education. You're going to be able to do better on these tests. However, it was possible for a poor person to move up, which is a pretty unique idea at the time. And again, because China's got this big, big, big bureaucracy, there's a lot of positions available for someone to go out there and get. So they would take these civil service exams, and a lot of it was applying, these Confucian ideas, the right way to do things, the right kind of ethics to do things, and making sure, you're loyal to the state and in the end to the emperor. So what we see is, while we have this meritocracy, it's going to allow some lower classes to move up. In reality, still stays pretty much the wealthy getting most of the power. Korea, they don't even let the poor people even take the civil service exam. They keep it closed off to the aristocracy and their kids. So that's going to be a difference we see in the region. To the Chinese credit, they do try and expand education to some people in the poor. And so we're going to see a larger, what we call kind of today, a middle class growing, and they'll become pretty powerful. We're going to call them the scholar gentry, which is kind of what we're getting into here. Now, at the top of social structure is still the emperor, and then you got kind of the government officials below them. But then we get into this kind of state officials, scholars, and nobles. That's what we call the scholar gentry. This is that bureaucracy, people that kind of keep the government system rolling. Now, as this spreads, the Vietnamese scholar gentry is going to be a little bit different. China's kind of trying to push in directly and rule over Vietnam. Vietnam doesn't want that. So the scholar gentry feel not loyalty to the emperor, but more to their local town people. And that's pretty important. And the Vietnamese are going to develop these guerrilla tactics, kind of fighting in the jungle and stuff against the Chinese. And these are tactics that are going to work 700 years later when the Americans and the French show up in the Vietnam War of the 20th century. Then you have your lower classes, and you'll get some historical debate here on, okay, what were really the lowest classes? Kind of in the Chinese view, farmers were above the merchants, because the idea being farmers are providing something for everyone and merchants are kind of taking stuff from everyone. You only make your money by getting other people's money from them. So like the philosophical idea of China was that the farmers were ahead. Again, in reality, a lot of these merchants, they're getting really, really rich, and they're being able to push into the scholar gentry. So kind of some blurring of the lines, and different historians are going to argue different things. Now, across East Asia and 99% of the world, we have what's called patriarchy. And with patriarchy, what we have going on is that women, yes, they're going to be respected, but they are 100% expected to be deferring to the men in their life, whether that's the emperor, whether that's a husband, a father. There's no political power. There's not really rights. And in China, they're going to have this thing called foot binding, which is where they would bind the foot to make it really small because, apparently that's what would make you more desirable to the males. That is something we're going to see go on until the early 1900s. I want to say like 19 teens is when it kind of goes away. And then in Vietnam, the women do have a little bit more rights. Again, it's a little bit more village oriented, kind of more family based, but that's still very, very limited compared to what we're going to see around. So that's kind of our first video here on the first two objectives of topic 1.1. We're going to jump into the third objective in our next video, and then we'll do a little quick summary as well. So again, be keeping those notes out. You're not writing new notes, you're adding to your notes. And that's going to be how we're going to end this video.